Hello, everybody. We have a good showing up, but I hope that it will also fill up. The panel is really just about giving some practical advice about the industry and what it entails for merchants in this industry to accept payments. And I hope that you will find it useful. And at the end of it, we will also have Q&A sessions where there's any questions that you would like to raise. We will have time for that. I did want to do the introductions directly from the panelists, so maybe if we just still go around and introduce so that you know who is who, and just a few things about the companies and that you do, and then we take it from there from further questions. Please.
Hi there, my name is Matt Parish. I'm recurring payments and financial services product lead at Truelayer. Truelayer is an open banking payments company. Our MO is to take open banking and make it better by adding, different services like merchant accounts. There are a lot of open banking companies out there. I like to think we're the best.
Hi, everybody. I'm Raphael Tetro, SVP Merchant Services at Nuvei. Nuvei is the payment partner of some of the world's largest and most thriving brands across the globe.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm the Vertical Growth Director, which is a fancy term for looking at the foresights in the future within the financial services and healthcare industries, and how it is applicable to the payments experience for customers and merchants alike at WorldPay. And WorldPay, like Nuvei, services a lot of the largest companies' needs in terms of payment gateways, acquiring, as well as various value-added services in the payment space.
Morning, I'm Sandra Mianda. I'm the head of UK and European business development for the acquiring division at Unlimint. We are a fintech. We've been around for about 12 years. We offer a number of solutions across acquiring, so card payments, APMs. We also support banking, so we have our own banking solutions along with the white label issuing solutions that we bring up to market. Thank you.
Hi, hello. Nice to meet you all. I'm Karen, working for TrustPay. I'm heading all of the front office departments in our company. And TrustPay is a licensed payment institution, so we are covering either card acquiring and also corporate accounts, plus any alternative payment methods with the main focus in Europe. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the introductions. And I would like to jump in right away with the most interesting question, I think, from the panel today, is what are the challenges in the industry for accepting payments, and also the challenges that are actually stemming out from the fact that merchants are actually classified as high risk, and what does that exactly mean for the merchants? So any practical tips and also any future forecast for the industry would be great from you. Maybe we start from Raphael.
Yeah. So I have to say that first and foremost, the way that we see the biggest challenge that merchants in this specific niche, in this specific industry are facing is, I think, the scrutiny when it comes to licenses. So when we take a look at how the card schemes, and by card schemes I mean Visa and MasterCard, take a look at merchants in this specific space, in this specific vertical, which are actually taking a look on getting offshore licenses rather than European licenses, for example, FCA, SISEC, then I think there's a lot of challenges for us. Some of us are acquirers in this space, but not only from card acceptance perspective, also we see also many different alternative payment methods providers also forcing us to not onboard offshore licenses. So the way that I see it, this is the biggest challenge that we face, and I'm sure that some of the Forex brokers out there find it difficult to find a reliable partner for this specific operation.
And do you see any remedy for that, or anything that that service providers also can do? Maybe also, Alex, you can sort of cover that from.
Yeah, so actually we have the same challenges, and we're trying to solve the same challenges for our merchants across the financial services space. And one of the things that we're trying to make sure is that to offer these business models most effectively, we have to really prove to the various partners that are either scrutinizing us from a regulatory standpoint or from their own standards internally from a compliance standpoint or risk standpoint, that all of the boxes have been checked. So it's very crucial that we kind of understand what are those boxes and make sure that all the safeguards and the reserving requirements are there so that people can confidently trade in these spaces without worrying whether the wrong authority is going to automatically shut down the accounts, or if the own risk and compliance department is going to feel uncomfortable about servicing these particular merchants going forward. So for us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to essentially estimate exactly what those risks are and make sure that all the different counterparties and all the different stakeholders in the organization best understand what to do in the face of changing risks so that we can keep the lights on as long as possible in those cases.
I like that. Keep the lights on for as long as possible. Sandra, please.
Yeah, I think I'll probably throw a different angle. Completely agree with what has been said so far. But I think from a merchant's perspective as well, we're in this area where we have to cater for new customer, right? For new buyer groups. So some of which that you haven't experienced before. So the whole customer experience, the behavior, how you cater that into the flow of getting them to buy from you, it's usually important. And, none of those are new challenges really, right? I mean, they've been around, so we know about that. But the climate today, it's accelerating the pressure in getting this right. And with that pressure, you've got to work and balance your short-term strategy to be able to tap into the opportunity to convert those customers whilst looking at what is the long-term outlook, right? What's the next new normal going to be? So it's just literally throwing much more complexity, much more priority in a very condensed, agenda that needs resources, of course, investment, and also building great understanding partnership, right? With providers that can not only support today the challenges as they are, but being able to contribute and enabling your business to not have to, sort of rechange the infrastructure just to cater for a new buyer group, a new payment method going into new markets. So those are, in my view, quite important as well today.
And I also would like to go a little bit. Sorry, I would like to also go a little bit into the open banking space because it's slightly different challenges in terms of how you also define risk and how you define risk for merchants. So I think it would be very interesting for the audience to understand those differences and also how you see it as not as being all card acquirers, actually as a main service.
Yeah. So, when I look at the challenges that merchants in financial services are seeing at the moment, I think it all stems from customer acquisition, and particularly in this space, we're thinking about acquiring customers that have already been acquired by a competitor in a customer's own bank, and so everything in open banking is oriented around improving customer acquisition for non-banks and sharing that data, making it easier to access, making it easy to make payments, and that also does change the risk paradigm that we look at and we see kind of. That we see in individual customers, because it changes from somewhat of a scheme-based, use case-based risk paradigm to something that's based on each customer's individual bank. So, every open banking payment is obviously approved by two factors. Some ASPSP banks have quite weak two-factor authentication, which results in higher fraud rates for those banks. And so instead of having this very use case based paradigm on where the fraud lives, we have a more comprehensive kind of it exists where there are weaknesses in each bank's own fraud prevention methods. So, yeah.
Right. And how do you tackle this aspect of open banking? Because it's always a very sort of discussed topic in terms of fraud, and since you're providing also services for open banking, I believe for payment service providers and for merchants alike, so how do you mitigate those risks as well?
We obviously have transaction monitoring and merchant monitoring, etc. But I think that the thing about open banking is it aligns the incentives correctly in that the ASPSP is responsible for preventing account takeover fraud and account takeover fraud, and they're also responsible for refunding customers. So if you're working in the open banking payment space and you've received a payment from a bank, it's yours.
Fair enough. Karen, would you like to add anything else? to all of the great thoughts.
Yeah, well, just to add, as it was already mentioned here, it's always a great challenge for all of the merchants in Forex industry to find a reliable partner in terms of either card acquiring or any other payment services. Mainly for the new brands, I would say that it's a kind of chicken and the egg situation where you cannot find a new payment service provider partner without the processing history. And at the same time, if you don't have any track record in terms of processing history and the transactions, you cannot get approved really easily. So it's like the never-ending vicious circle, I would say. And perhaps also from the more specific battles in terms of technical stuff, I would also mention the 3D secure situation, because so far it was affecting mostly EEA market. But during the next year, Visa is planning to stop supporting the old 3D secure version, what would mean that also the Forex merchants who are processing more on non-EEA markets would be affected by this, because they cannot count with the fraud liability shift if they will be processing just with the old 3D secure authentication. So yeah, that would be the most future challenges.
Okay, great. So we talked a little bit about challenges, and now is the most exciting part where we talk about trends. So what do we see in the sort of in the emergent payment acceptance sort of markets, and what is sort of new coming, and how you as a payment service providers actually facilitate the merchants in this case in terms of accepting payments through all of the channels that they are actually selling their services, which I think is very important. So maybe let's start from Sandra.
Yeah. So again, I think the main challenge is to make clarity with everything that is out there, right? There's definitely multiple options. There's a need to reach outside of your current borders, so understanding the opportunity that is today ahead of any providers, any merchants. So with that, I think what's really important is to try to be consistent very much. You're really putting a greater focus on understanding the customer, the user experience, and tailoring that, as opposed to, there is this mass, sort of trends around going global, right? So what does that mean, going global truly? I mean, is it really the case of having every single possible payment method on your checkout flow? Does that really convert? So it's really finding the balance between giving options, giving preferences, versus as well, what does that then create for yourself as an impact, right, in terms of reconciliation, in terms of processing, etc., and also from a cost perspective, right? So the more you consolidate, the more you work in partnership, and some of my colleagues, Karen, was mentioning around the chicken and egg situations, whereby you're expected to give evidence and solid history around your processing volumes, etc. So when you go down the tail route, so you may have a great opportunity, but that's just, in essence, represent a small fraction that an acquirer may not have a great appetite. So by building this greater understanding of your business model, consolidating where you can, the picture of where you're going as a business, it's definitely something that I think is valuable and really important to try to go more tailored, as opposed to just mass and hit and miss situation, right? Having everything and expecting it will just convert. It doesn't always. You need to always find that balance.
So what you're trying to say is kind of that the tailored approach for the merchants is what is important. But since we looked at the challenges from the card schemes perspective, I think it's very important also to focus, let's say, on the actual trends outside of the card scheme. So is there anything that you guys see that is very popular now, or something that that the broker should look at? Raphael, maybe you would want to cover that.
Yeah. So I think that in the perspective of, if we're looking at alternative payment methods as alternative to card processing, I think that during the past few years, we've seen a major transformation towards shifting a little bit away from card processing, which is, I would say, kind of a commodity, the perspective of many financial services brokers. And we've seen many new payment methods come to market, which wasn't here a few years ago. So if we take a look at buy now, pay later, if we take a look at open banking, if we take a look at cryptocurrencies as means of payments, these are things that weren't existing a few years ago. And I think that if any financial services broker wants to thrive or want to make sure that they offer as many different options to their traders, they have to have these payment methods. Due to these recent changes, they cannot just rely on the standard wire transfer or card processing. And also, just one final note, also on the card processing, there has been some improvements. So if we're not taking a look on just pay-ins, but also on payouts, so Visa Direct, MasterCard Money Send, these are major improvements that in the past, it used to take 1 to 5 business days until a trader used to receive their funds to their card. And now it will take minutes. So this is also a major transformation that took place recently. And just as an advice to any financial services broker that is sitting here, it's super important to make sure that you guys have these specific methods or these specific options just to elevate the payment processing experience to our traders.
Yeah, and actually just to a little bit cover that point specifically for payouts through Visa Direct and Money Send is actually that the card schemes are looking at refunds in this case as a complete no-go for the industry, and it's actually paramount that the providers like us actually do provide these services to the merchants because otherwise they cannot actually do and operate in the way that they're supposed to and operate safely. But actually since open banking is marked as one of the trends, and I really am fascinated by the space, and I think that the growth was really, really significant. So maybe that you can tell us, Matt, a little bit about how you see it, and how do you see the hype of the open banking, and also not covering Europe, but maybe also going outside of Europe.
Yeah, I think the hype is real. Not to blow my own trumpet in any way. Open banking has seen a really tremendous adoption over the last 12 to 18 months, where it's gone from a payment method that existed in the Revolut app. They were the first people to really adopt open banking payments 18 months ago, to today it's become a feature you need to launch with in any kind of modern mobile investment app. And it was great to launch with Lightyear recently, one of our newest customers. And we've seen that open banking converts higher than cards do on average. You obviously receive the funds immediately. You don't need to wait for your PSP to send you the funds a few days later, so you can move those funds directly into a customer's trading account immediately. And you're obviously more assured with fraud checks that have been done, the fact that chargebacks can't happen. And it lines up all the boxes, it checks all the boxes. So that's really been a trend over the last 18 months. And then there's the newest open banking feature that's coming out in 2022 called variable recurring payments, which takes open banking from single bank transfers to kind of recurring bank transfers that can be initiated on a merchant schedule. So, it's really becoming the payment method that was built and designed for people in financial services. And open banking is really explicit about this is for financial services. This is to increase competition and make it easier for people who aren't banks to compete with banks. And I'm really excited about that happening throughout 2022 and 2023.
Actually, still another question towards that as well is how do you see the adoption of open banking outside of Europe, actually? Because there is some discussion about it, but maybe you see also some key countries that are moving faster towards open banking. I know Brazil, for example, has definitely very aggressive plans in terms of that. Yeah,
so I think it depends how you define open banking. Obviously, access to accounts has been around for a very long time. So, the US actually is one of the most developed open banking markets in the world. But if you're looking at APIs specifically, FDX, the financial data exchange, is moving relatively slowly. So I think, API access where you really want to reduce barriers to entry into the market is something that's pushing things really fast in countries like Australia, countries like Brazil. They've started off with data because in the UK and Europe, you have like a 5-year track history of open banking data being something that works really well and then increases competition in retail banking. I think that moving into open banking payments is inevitable. So if the UK, the UK is a success story in open banking payments, it will be copied around the world. It's just a question of when. Brazil's already talking about variable recurring payments, so is Australia. So I think it's nascent but happening, is what I would say.
Very good. Is there anyone else that would like to cover, or shall we move a little bit further? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say is one aspect that you want to think about with all of the innovation that's happening in the space is making sure that everything behind the scenes is as flexible as possible. So we talk about buy now, pay later as a payment option, and I'm definitely evangelist on this front for multiple different applications across different verticals. At the same time, we know that there is the potential for regulation in that space. Similarly, if you look at other industries, that there's different payment methods that are actually being innovated as we speak that we're not talking about in this room quite yet. So what you want to think about is that the pace of change that's happening is necessitating for when that new payment method comes in or that new regulation comes in, that you can offer a switch as quickly as possible. So that's where I'm big on, hey, how can we offer as many APMs, but make sure that when it's in the customer hands, that it's prioritized in the right way for the right needs of the specific customer. So from a CFD trading perspective, is how do you make sure that the maximum amounts of money from your top payment providers are going to be able to be transacted if you have those volumes or those transaction values necessary. Whereas there might be other applications where you want to focus in on a couple APMs that might be better for more volume, smaller transactions, so on and so forth.
Cool.
And I would perhaps just add to this audience that it's always important to look into the correct APMs mix you are offering to your customers. So in some European countries, I would say that even some of the APMs are not APMs anymore, but they dominate the market. So for example, the proper answer of what's the most popular payment method in Netherlands would be MasterCard, because like the alternative payment methods, because Ideal is dominating the local market to so huge extent that it's not considered to be alternative anymore, but one of the main payment offerings when it comes to e-com.
Great. Thank you so much for the answer. So we kind of covered the challenges and the trends, but I would like to kind of use the last remaining time to really talk about practical advice for the merchants in the audience, given the fact that some of those are actually working and operating globally, and how do you also feel that the regulatory framework actually influences how these merchants accept payments? So if you have any practical advice, I think that is the time now to give it out. So maybe we start with you, Raphael.
So I have to say that if we're starting to take a look at what are the best options for financial services brokers to take advantage of the payment suite that their payment providers are offering, I have to say that each and every financial services broker needs to ask themselves one question. Am I getting what am I looking for in terms of the proper acceptance rates from my payment provider? Am I taking advantage of the payment methods, alternative payment methods that my payment provider offers? Because we need to remember that not every financial services broker has the time or capacity to integrate to each and every payment method as a standalone. So my colleague here mentioned that Ideal in Netherlands is super important, which is 100% accurate. But let's imagine the situation where your payment provider is not offering Ideal. So it means that you need to go find another provider that offers it in a specific country. You need to go allocate resources, technical resources, onboarding resources to implement that specific method. And this is a time where you're not focusing on the product, on building a scalable trading platform. So I would say that this is, for me, the most important challenge or the most important question that financial services should ask themselves. Are they really optimizing or taking full advantage of the capabilities that their payment service provider offers?
Thank you so much, Sandra.
Yeah, just to add, in fact, to what Raphael was saying, I think, and also to the point Karen made, it's quite interesting in terms of some of those standards. So what we qualify as the classic payment method versus the APMs, and the same goes with high risk. What do we really qualify as being high risk, as that being seen from the acquirer perspective? So I think from where the merchant is sitting, it's that dialogue, bringing the acquirer in understanding your model, right? Because you could be operating segment of your business, which is, by definition deemed high risk, but what is really high risk? I mean, you could have a part of your business which is e-commerce, but actually you've got long fulfillment terms, and that's equally, being deemed high risk. So going beyond the assumption that everybody understand or qualify as high risk in the same way, I think that's one of the first preconception to get over, because there's a lot more flexibility or agility to be able to establish with that dialogue to get the understanding of your business model in the different areas, and equally in the way you would be profiled, in the way that, all of those, the MCCs, the descriptors, and all of that goes to play in terms of, potential issues with customer chargeback, refunds, and all of that. So going beyond just the expectation that because, yes, we are payment expert, but you the expert of your industry. We understand probably quite generally what, the Forex, what, the profile of your business is, but you've got an opportunity to really educate equally and understand what we deem being high risk. What is the appetite? How does that translate in terms of the exposure? So really going beyond what we've accepted for standard in the industry. This is really an opportunity to die.
Yeah, but I think also coming back to sort of the practical advice here, because we did cover, alternative payment methods, and but I think it's very important also to note that not all alternative payment methods are available for example, offshore licensed brokers. And this is really a challenge because, when we're going out through the payments industry, everyone has the same payment methods, but then suddenly when the broker actually needs to work and kind of find, the ones, so how do we, what advice can you give, for better working on this for the guys?
So from my perspective, it's funny you mention that because we'll always say we have hundreds of APMs available
exactly.
with WorldPay. And yes, when it comes down to it, it depends on the jurisdiction what is going to be available. But what I would echo here, though, is that we're all here as your partners. We're coming into these discussions with you to figure out how can we convince all the different stakeholders in the grand scheme that, while they might think of something as high risk or some new business model as very foreign, our goal is to kind of help other people understand this whole system so that they understand it isn't high risk, or we put in the checks and balances in place that are the cheapest for your business to kind of solve those problems. So with a lot of different merchants that I work with, we actually go down into the value chain. We talk about their business model. We talk about what they would like their business model to be. And we figure out, okay, these are the stakeholders we need to get involved to kind of look at how we can help those stakeholders get on board. So I would venture as practical advice, talk to anyone that you're working with and figure out how you can solve those problems together.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, and in terms of other recommendations, perhaps some of the offshore brokers or the merchants who are mainly penetrating non-EEA markets, it would be great to focus mainly on the card processing, because I know that in some countries it's really good to have mainly this offering and perhaps display the proper currency or the native currency for the customer. And then it would be also better in terms of the refunds or payouts processes. So yeah, in some markets, yeah, if there is a limited offer of the APMs, it's really tough. But for any non-European markets, it can be great to cover the native payment page with the local currency on it, and with the card processing, obviously.
I think also, Karen, you touched a very also good point here, is that with all of the alternative payment methods, and I think it's a big topic, for our merchants, comes a lot of complexity in terms of how those payment methods are collected, how they're settled, currency conversions, and all of this kind of stuff. Is there any advice for you from you to the merchants? How could they sort of navigate, this specific, subject?
Yeah, of course. I would say that when it comes to APMs mainly locally, it's always good to have also the local settlement options. So, for example, across Europe with the local currency markets, it would be quite tough to, for example, process BLIK payments in Poland if you don't have a Polish zloty settlement account. So, and since this is a local currency of the customers as well, they are expecting to be any refunds processed in the same currency. So yeah, that would be great to cover.
Great, thank you so much. And also, Matt, from your side, so what are the tips for the brokers here?
Yeah, I think my main tip would be to really evaluate how you acquire and retain customers. Because in the last 3 years, open banking has really changed how you can do that customer acquisition and customer retention. And 20% improvements on the conversion of your first payment into a broker results in, firstly, a really material decrease in your customer acquisition cost, and then also a really material increase in the revenue that you have going through your platform. That is one small example of how open banking can help, and a more comprehensive view of how you're doing customer retention and customer acquisition would really help anyone who's in the kind of broker space, I think.
Yeah, and I think that kind of flows also nicely into our last question, is actually about user experience, right, for the end customer. How important do you think it is, and what do you, as also payment service providers in the field, do to help merchants achieve this sort of customer journey and user experience? Alex, maybe you would like to start.
Yeah, no. So I think like the swear word out of Money 2020 was embedded finance. And that's the thing, is when we look at the customer experience for any of our merchants in the financial services industry, thankfully we've gone a long way from having to file your KYC via paper, and the authentication used to take weeks to get something done. Now it definitely is a lot easier, but we still have a long way to go. Is how can you make something as frictionless as possible, not across the journey? So I like to, one of the statistics that is always top of mind is about 1/3 of poor payments experience in the grand scheme of onboarding a customer fail, and they will never go back to the company because of that. And that's a shocking amount, and that's just one step in the overall onboarding process. So with that, what I always advise is, okay, make it as easy as possible. Integrate it into your customer experience and think of it as a holistic aspect, and then make sure that you can figure out where there is friction. That's where recurring payments and things that are as easy as your gym membership are quite necessary to kind of make that customer stay forever, essentially. So with that, we're always innovating in that space and making sure that we can offer those different options for however people want to deposit or pay into their accounts, as well as the experience that a company wants to deliver to its customers. That's where we tend to focus in on.
Thank you. Sandra?
To your question, how important? Extremely important. It's all about that, right? And across segment. I think, there's a lot that can be said, but one word of advice for me is to be consistent. Consistent because there's multi-channel point, really understanding what drives a customer to come to you. It's such a complex market. There's so many options. There's so many services. That consistency across devices, across touch point is worth investing. So it's not necessarily, it is 100% important to have the preferences to cater for those consumers. But I would start with that consistent approach across the different touch points, really understanding that journey. For me, it's what leads them to the conversion, then to what are the options available to them, and tailoring that. I'd say.
Yeah, and actually, when I think about the industry in general, I think because we talk a lot about challenges, how to accept payments and where to what kind of payment methods. But I think there is really not enough focus on the actual customer journey and actually UI experience for the end user. And I think the clients who are not sort of focusing on that and the payment service providers that are not helping with that are really not doing themselves a favor, right? Because we're still talking about approval rates, we're still talking about things that help the merchants grow in their industries. Any thoughts also from your side, Raphael, on that?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. As somebody who's been in this space for the past 10 years, and especially with the niche of financial services, but also I'm taking a look and working on other verticals as well. I have to say that sometimes it feels like the financial services is a little bit dragging behind in terms of innovation, in terms of how they take a look at payments. And it's a shame because they invest so much time in bringing the traders, right? So, and taking a look just at our neighbor, the gaming space, they take so much importance when it comes to payment processing, and they take a look at this crucial point in time where they finally brought the end user to make a payment. And sometimes financial services brokers are not taking full emphasis on this specific flow. So we discussed a lot about alternative payment methods, but there are many different aspects such as user experience. Your payment provider gives you the reason why the transaction has been declined. Use that specific reason. The transaction has been declined due to lost or stolen card. Ask the trader to make a payment with a different card. There are many different aspects, local languages, the alternative payment methods, making sure the 3D Secure is flexible to 3D Secure 2, 3D Secure 1. There's also a new feature which is called partial approval. A trader trying to make a payment of £1,000, for example, but their bank allows them only to take 500. Use the 500 and ask them to use a different payment method for the remaining 500. There are many different aspects, which unfortunately, there could be an improvement in this specific space. And if there are some payment managers here, and I think that also in the financial services industry, they take a note on the importance of having payment manager, dedicated position just for payments. And if you have a specialist who is focusing only on payments, it's very easy to see the importance or the increase in revenue as a result. So this is just my...
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And there's really a lot of things that you can look at when we're talking about payment acceptance and the payment page and how the user experience looks like and whether it's one-click payment. There's a lot of things that that the company should focus on. And I think it's paramount that I think we improve also and help as the payment service providers to bring attention to our clients that look, this is actually helping you, because at the end of the day it helps us. This is also our bottom line in nevertheless. I have one more. I think we have a little bit more time for one more opinion about this.
Yeah, so I suppose that, as already mentioned, the consistency and smoothness of the process is the most important factor. So as licensed industries already know, that it's like common thing for either financial service providers and also for Forex merchants that you need to verify your customers during the onboarding process. So perhaps my advice would be to really have a smooth KYC tool, which would not get anyone stuck during the process. And then once finally you have all of the details collected properly, like in terms of licensing scope, then of course it's really important to have as few steps during the payment process as possible. So that would be the most important.
Okay, great. I think that was very thorough and very interesting. And I would like to also take some time for a small Q&A session. So if anyone has questions from the audience that they would like to ask. No? No one has questions? That's a first. That is a first. So if no one has any questions, then I would like to thank the panelists. It was really great, and I'm sure that you can find all of the people here on the stage and ask any other further questions if you would like to. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.